Let's talk about the greatest Royal Rumble in Saudi Arabia. It is coming up this Friday, the 27th. I will be recording a sound-off extra to post on YouTube as I would for any other pay-per-view. And so I will do a full YouTube review for this show the day after. I don't know if it'll be up early that morning or if it'll be later that morning, but watch for it on Saturday. I'll have my full review on YouTube at that point. There were reports of a possible coup of the Saudi government the other day and a drone attack, but it turned out to be a toy drone, and it got shot down. This was not the week for that to happen. Vince McMahon probably had a coronary when he read this story, and seeing all those dollar bills going up in smoke, or however they're paying him. Maybe they're paying him in gold bullion. I don't know, but they're going all out for this show. This is officially a 5-hour show. 6 hours, if you count the 1-hour pre-show that starts at 11 a.m. Eastern. But the runtime is set to be 12 p.m., officially 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. That is a 5-hour show. And it would make the second 5-hour show that WWE, or 5-hour plus show that WWE has had in not only the same year, in the same month. We already had WrestleMania. And now just a few weeks later, we have the greatest Royal Rumble. Now, it's also going to be airing on traditional pay-per-view for the price tag of $54.99. Or you can just subscribe to the network and get it free, because they're still doing the whole free month or 3 months or whatever. Unless you live in a remote area, like in the wilderness somewhere with crappy internet, please do not pay $54.99 for this show when you can get it for free. Please don't do that. Been a lot of talk about the whole cultural aspect of this show, and obviously the women are not going to be there. The women are not allowed to compete. Is it, look, is this a propaganda thing? Of course it is. The Saudis are paying WWE apparently a huge sum. I would love to know the price tag. You would think at some point that this has to come out, right? They're a publicly traded company. I'm hoping at some point we find out how much this deal is truly worth to this company. It's obviously in the many millions of dollars. But whatever it is, they're paying them a boatload of money. And WWE is not the only, organization or entity that the Saudi government is courting and paying money to. This is part of this, 10-year-long project, I guess, that the country is undertaking to either modernize or give the perception that they're modernizing, and they want to bring other big events, to Saudi Arabia. And I've gotten a couple of emails from some of our listeners who live in Saudi Arabia. One of them actually lives in Jeddah, which is where the show is taking place. And they have been complaining loudly about the whole ticket situation. So you have a stadium there that seats over 60,000 people. Now, once you get the staging finished and everything else, it may not be 60. Maybe it'll be 50-something thousand. But there's going to be at least 50,000 people in that stadium for this show. And there's been a lot of complaints from even a couple of our own listeners, who are single men who would love to be able to pay for seats like ringside seats or seats that are in the lower bowl, in the first few rows maybe. And they are not allowed to do so. Those people are being relegated, like the hardcore fans are being relegated to the cheap seats and the nosebleeds in many cases. And those first several rows are reserved, I guess, I don't know if they're reserved by the royal family for people. I believe they're reserved for families. And there's actually a requirement that, if families are coming to the show, there's a requirement that it has to have at least one woman as part of the group. It's a requirement that families attending must have at least one female in the group. And you would say, well, why would that be a requirement? That's awfully bizarre. Well, it's not that bizarre at all, really, because if they're reserving seats that are in the first 5, 10, 15 rows, whatever it is, especially on the hard camera side, and they're saying that you must have women as part of your groups if you're going to buy tickets in those sections, it's because they want the show to come off a certain way. They want people, when they watch the show, to see families and women all enjoying the show. It's a total propaganda thing. Absolutely. It's absolutely propaganda. Does that make you uncomfortable? Look, it's kind of odd, I would say, to have a company like WWE who loves to talk so openly and so, vocally about the women's revolution and all these things with the women that they're doing. And now, They are part of this propaganda effort by the government there, and they are not even allowed to bring their female talent over with them. So yes, that is a bit hypocritical on their part. But look, it is what it is. It's, to them, it's all about the money. It's all about the bottom line. They're getting a lot of money for this, and that's really, at the end of the day, what's the most important thing to them. Can they make money or not? They felt they could. They love breaking into these new areas and internationally, globally. They've been trying to break into China for years. And you could say a lot of things about the Chinese regime there as well, but don't think for 1 second that if WWE had a chance to break into China, they wouldn't jump at the opportunity. So that's just the way it is. To me, I look at this and I say this is a pretty stacked card. It's a pretty loaded lineup. I'm not going to not watch the show. I'm not protesting the show. I'm more interested to see how the crowd comes off, because if they're going to fill those seats, the immediate seats, with people who maybe are not wrestling fans necessarily, maybe they are special guests of the royal family or something, and they're just trying to pack the stadium with people like that, I don't know that you're going to get a great reaction to a lot of these matches. If you have the really rabid hardcore wrestling fans sort of banished to the outer ends of the stadium, and you've got an open air stadium. So you have, whenever you have an open air WrestleMania, you got to always worry about the acoustics there as well. You could end up with a whole bunch of dead matches on this show. And believe me, the crowd and the crowd reactions do affect people's perception and enjoyment of shows like this. So I'm more interested in stuff like that and what the stage looks like and just how the event is presented. That has me more interested than anything else. The shakeup, the Superstar shakeup, has sort of rendered, I think, a lot of the outcomes here very predictable, given some of the moves they made. But let's run down this card. I'll throw some predictions out there. We'll start with the Cruiserweight title. Cedric Alexander will be defending the Cruiserweight Championship on this show against the winner of a gauntlet match that will take place this Tuesday on 205 Live. I'm not sure offhand exactly who's in the gauntlet. My guess is it's going to end up being either Mustafa Ali or Buddy Murphy. Buddy Murphy did not make weight. They did a weigh-in segment. He did not make weight. He was overweight. And so for now, he is disqualified from having any championship opportunities. I suspect that may change on Tuesday, and it might be Murphy getting the shot in Saudi Arabia. But again, if it's not Murphy, it's probably Ali. Either way, I think Cedric retains. I don't see him losing the title that quickly. Jeff Hardy will defend the United States Championship against Jinder Mahal. Jinder will get his rematch. He will have a chance to bring the belt back to Monday Night Raw, which I don't see it happening. I think I'm going with Jeff Hardy as my pick. It is not impossible. It is not impossible that they switch the U.S. title on this show, give the belt back to Jinder, and maybe they only did it, did what they did on Monday, that is, to allow them to do a title change in Saudi Arabia. But then the Intercontinental Championship has to change. And it has to end up on someone like Joe or like Miz, who can then take the belt to SmackDown, because you can't have the IC and the U.S. titles on the same show. So if the U.S. title switches, it guarantees that we're going to have a new Intercontinental Champion later on in the night, assuming that match, the ladder match, takes place later on. That is not an impossibility. So I'm not going to sit here and say there's no way that Jinder Mahal is going to win. Yeah, just like there was no way Brock Lesnar was going to win at WrestleMania, right? All the conventional wisdom goes out the window. But I think Jeff Hardy is going to retain. I think they'll keep that U.S. belt on SmackDown. The Bar is going to take on Woken Matt and Woken Bray, Woken Wyatt, I guess we'll call him, for the vacant Raw Tag Team titles. And this is one of those matches where the outcome becomes very predictable. Now that we know that Sheamus and Cesaro have moved. They are on SmackDown. So why would a SmackDown team win the Raw Tag Team titles? So we'll see Matt and Bray win the belts, I think, in Saudi Arabia. We have the Bludgeon Brothers defending the SmackDown Tag Team titles against the Usos. Bludgeon Brothers get the win. Seth Rollins will defend the Intercontinental Championship in a ladder match against Finn Balor, The Miz, and Samoa Joe. And I see some reports that in some of the advertising, Bobby Lashley has been added to the match as well. That's not official, but it's possible Lashley could get added and make it a 5-way. Right now, it's a 4-way. And I'm picking Seth Rollins to retain, but with a little asterisk next to it, because if Jinder Mahal wins the U.S. title and takes the belt back to Raw, then the title will change here. If the title is going to change here, it's got to end up either on Miz or Samoa Joe. And If I had to take a guess between the two of them, I would say Miz. I think Miz may well end up getting the belt back. Of the two of them, I think it would be Miz. But I'm sticking with Rollins as my pick to retain. Rusev. Remember I said Rusev was bumped from the casket match with The Undertaker? It was going to be Chris Jericho against The Undertaker. Well, guess what? Somebody changed their mind. And so once again, Rusev is back in the casket match. Chris Jericho's talked about this. He doesn't care. He doesn't mind. He said there's no big story or backstage politics or backstage heat or anything like that. There's no real fun, exciting, interesting story behind it. Vince McMahon changed his mind. Simple as that. They texted him, hey, you're going to be in the casket match now? He said, fine. And later on, he got another text saying, hey, you're out of the casket match? And he said, fine. So Jericho, I guess, will be in the Rumble match. And Jericho is he's a total team player. He'll do whatever they want him to do. In fact, he did an interview on his tour bus with Chris Van Vliet, who's done some really actually awesome interviews recently with a lot of big names. He did a great one with Johnny Gargano right after the TakeOver match he had with Tommaso Ciampa. But he did an interview on Jericho's tour bus, and they were talking about a whole bunch of different things, and this was one of the things they had discussed. And he mentioned in that interview that he got the text messages saying one thing, and then they got another text saying another. And he said, look, to me, it doesn't matter. I'm on board. Whatever they need me to do, I'll do. He also mentioned in that interview, by the way, not to go off course too much here, but he was asked by Van Vliet, look, are you doing any matches in the near future with New Japan? Because Jericho, after he lost to Kenny Omega, he was on the next show and he attacked Naito. And everybody thought, well, they're building to a Jericho-Naito match. And Jericho said, well, we tried, and they just couldn't make it happen. And he made it sound like it wasn't just an issue of scheduling. He went on to talk a lot about how, in the position I'm in, I need to be compensated accordingly, and I'm putting my neck on the line here, because if WWE could turn around at some point and say, look, you're going to keep working for New Japan, the hell with you, we're not going to use you anymore. And he could burn a bridge with Vince McMahon, because you never know, right? Vince could turn on a dime. So for him to go back and do more matches in New Japan, he said financially, because he claimed he made them millions with that first match with Omega. He said that they have to make it worth his while. So all this talk about money made me think that they either lowballed him on an offer or they made him an offer that he wasn't entirely happy with. And so there will be no match with Naito. There are no more Jericho New Japan matches scheduled for the foreseeable future. Doesn't mean it won't happen at some point. But, any talk about, well, maybe in June or July, they're just waiting until the Fozzy schedule opens up. There is nothing scheduled with Jericho and New Japan going forward. But it is Rusev. He is back in the casket match against The Undertaker. I don't think the outcome here is in doubt at all whatsoever. But the way they keep changing their mind, and it's funny, I look at this card, as stacked as this card is, and as much as they're changing their mind on this, that, and the other, you would think, like, it's not Vince McMahon booking this show. It's like some 8-year-old Saudi prince who's like, they allowed him to book the show because they're paying them so much money, and it's like a kid sitting on his throne who says, you know what, actually put this guy back in the match. I like this match better. So nothing would shock me at this point. But Undertaker will win. He will quite literally bury Rusev in the casket and roll him away. I still say for Rusev, it's a great spot to be in. Even though he's going to lose, he's wrestling The Undertaker on a big WrestleMania caliber show here. 50, 60,000 people, on pay-per-view, on the network. This is a big deal, and it's a big spot for him to be in. Hopefully it's not a total squash. I would hope he gets some offense in. But it's a good spot for Rusev to be in, so I don't cry for him. AJ Styles will defend the WWE Championship against Nutcracker Nakamura. AJ will retain the championship, was my prediction. John Cena, now a free agent, both on TV and in his personal life, will go one-on-one with Triple H. I'm going with John Cena here to win the match. And then we have the main event. Well, actually, I take that back. Not the main event, but we have a steel cage match for the Universal Championship. This is Vince McMahon's main event. Roman Reigns challenging Brock Lesnar for the Universal title. It's hard to make any predictions when it comes to Lesnar these days. I think I still maintain, as I'm sure many of you do, that Roman will have his coronation at some point. I think it will happen on Friday. I think that the reason that the finish to the WrestleMania match got changed, and by all accounts it was changed, and it wasn't until even Reigns himself got to the building that Sunday in New Orleans that he was told, hey, Brock's going over. The reason for that, I still believe, is that they wanted to make the Saudi Arabia show an even bigger deal, and they wanted Roman, or at least they wanted Reigns to have, the potential to get a better reaction than he would have gotten in the Superdome to winning the championship. And so it could turn out to be this great coronating moment for him where he's conquered the beast and they set off pyro and the Saudi fans are going crazy for him. I don't know if it's going to work out that way or not, but I believe that's what's going on here. They wanted a big moment for the Saudi Arabia show. And at the same time, there's a much better chance that Roman will get a big babyface reaction for winning the title than he would have on American soil. So I believe they are going to change the title. It could be Brock's last match. All this talk about him signing a new contract, I'm not sure I buy into that, but I'm picking Roman Reigns. I think we're going to have a new champion here on the show. And last but not least, we have the first ever 50-man Royal Rumble match and this will be Royal Rumble rules. They're not using the Royal Rumble name, but it's actually a battle royal. There will be, I don't know if it's going to be 30 seconds, if it's going to be 60 seconds, 90 seconds, but there will be intervals. And it will follow Royal Rumble rules, with the winner receiving a trophy. The WWE Espanol account tweeted out a graphic that had the trophy in it. And looking at this trophy, I would hate to have to check that thing with my baggage on my way back to the States. This trophy looks gigantic. But Kurt Angle is going to be participating in the Royal Rumble match. Chris Jericho will be in the Rumble match. Rey Mysterio has not officially been announced, but the belief is that he will be in there as well. The Great Khali is supposed to be in there. Braun Strowman, Daniel Bryan, and about 45 other men will be involved. I say men because, as I mentioned, the women will not be on this show. So every title really, except both of the women's championships, are up for grabs on this show. Now, one of our listeners, Steve, from Virginia, sent me an email pointing out that with all of the men being in Saudi Arabia, there are no live events scheduled from the 27th of April through the 29th, I believe. And he said, should WWE put together an all-women's house show, at least one of those nights, as something of a test? With women from both Raw and SmackDown, so almost like a female super show of sorts. It's probably too late now, but I think that would have been a great idea. I think you promote it as some kind of, like I said, an all-women's super show, special attraction. You do that in one or two markets. See how it does. I mean, there's really no time now to promote something like that. I mean, ideally you would want time to really promote it. But you do a show or two like that, and you see how it does, tickets-wise and just overall, reaction-wise, how they do. As an experiment, I think it would have made sense to at least try